betrayal, lies, and a light affair. Is that even a thing? Hey everyone. It's time for an out-of-this-world story on today's episode of Breakup, Cheater, Trust. Trust erodes slowly. Little excuses pile up, inconsistencies become harder to ignore, and before you know it, someone's tracking a car at 3 a.m., uncovering secrets they never wanted to find. This brings us to today's discussion. Is a light affair a real category, or just a desperate excuse for someone trying to soften their own betrayal? Up first. At what point do you realize the person you love is willing to risk everything just to maintain a lie? My psychotherapist wife had an affair with a client. Hello, Reddit. I'm a 44-year-old man, and for 22 years, I was married to my wife, 46. We have 3 kids. 11, 15, and 20. Back in 2022, I asked for a divorce and moved out, but we never followed through with the paperwork. Instead, we tried again, dating for a year and a half, making an effort to rebuild our relationship. And for a while it seemed to be working. That is, until about a year ago when she started growing distant. My wife is a psychotherapist specializing in dialectical behavior therapy, DBT. She told me she was overwhelmed with high-needs clients. I took her at her word, until one night when I noticed her parked outside a random apartment complex at 3 a.m. She had borrowed my Tesla, and I spotted her location through the car's tracking widget. When I confronted her, she claimed she was just visiting a friend. That struck me as odd. This was extremely out of character for her. Red flags went up immediately. After pressing for details, she admitted it was a new friend from work. They had planned to meet earlier, but schedules got mixed up, so they ended up hanging out late. Our marriage had always allowed friendships with the opposite sex, but we had never discussed having an open relationship. Still, something felt off. She was evasive, reluctant to share more. After a week of questioning, she finally gave me his name. She admitted it looked bad, agreed it was inappropriate, and promised she wouldn't see him outside of work again. That was in early May 2024. Fast forward to June. I found out she had gone back to his place, staying until 6 a.m. When I confronted her again, she insisted he was just a friend. She had too much to drink, fell asleep on his couch, and that was all there was to it. I didn't believe her. Sensing my doubt, she suddenly needed space. She asked me to leave her alone for a week. That wasn't happening. During that time I did some digging. I found the guy's Instagram, phone number, and address. Thinking a direct conversation might clear things up, I reached out to him. If he was really just a friend, he wouldn't mind setting the record straight, right? His response. He called me a little witch, not the actual word he used, and told me to go away. That reaction only confirmed my suspicions. So, I decided to visit his apartment in person. Maybe face-to-face I could get some real answers. When he came downstairs, he got right in my face, hurling the same insults and cursing me out. I kept my cool and calmly asked, "What's going on with my wife?" His response. Silence. Then he called the police. Before they could arrive, he shoved me to the ground. Salt. I had no interest in escalating things, so I left. Later that night, I told my wife I knew something was going on based on his reaction alone. That's when she finally admitted to a light affair. Her words. It wasn't physical, she insisted. Just innocent meme sharing and fun conversations. I was devastated. But according to her, I was overreacting, blowing things out of proportion. The aftermath. Despite the betrayal, we kept talking, trying to salvage the relationship. We went to music festivals, spent time together, and were still intimate. It almost felt like we were rebuilding something. Then, in August, she bought her own Tesla. While setting up her account, she suddenly froze, realizing she could see my car's location, and I could see hers. That made her nervous. I had nothing to hide. But she insisted on separating accounts. Another red flag. The very next night, I drove by his apartment. Sure enough, her car was parked right outside. I texted both of them, asking her to come out and talk. She refused. I went home and waited. Something gnawed at me. I went into her room. I'm not proud of what I did next, But I saw her journal sitting on her work table. It was open, so I read it. That's how I found the truth. The man she was seeing wasn't just a random friend. He was one of her DBT clients, a man with borderline personality disorder. Her journal detailed therapy sessions that lasted 4, 5, even 6 hours. She described physical contact, kissing, dry humping, and deeply inappropriate discussions. She fantasized about a life with him. She wrestled with guilt but couldn't stop. When she got home, I confronted her. She broke down, begging me not to report her to the Board of Behavioral Health. But I had to. I left at 2 a.m. and immediately scheduled a session with my own therapist to process everything. Turns out, all therapists are mandatory reporters when it comes to ethical breaches. My therapist reported her. An investigation was launched. The Attorney General's office contacted me for a sworn statement. I kept things vague. I didn't want to be vindictive, but I did convince my wife to self-report, which she did. The investigation is still ongoing. Meanwhile, our marriage is officially over. We're in the thick of divorce proceedings. In retaliation, she took out a harassment restraining order against me for reading her journal and bombarding her with texts. Even now, I still get gut feelings that she's seeing him. Every time I check. Right. Her car is still parked outside his place at night. She continues to risk everything. Her career, her reputation, her family. As for me, I'm focusing on healing. I see my therapist regularly, and I'm staying steady on my medication. Writing this all out has been strangely cathartic. Through all of this, the biggest thing I've learned. My own self-worth. What do you think? Is a light affair just an excuse? What's the biggest red flag you ignored in a relationship? And how did it come back to bite you? Up next. 2 years of lies, a secret second life. And now OP's cheating spouse is acting like she's the victim for wanting out. Stay tuned.